Welcome everyone to tonight's asset protection webinar series. We are excited about the topic. We're excited about the speakers. We're going to be discussing how self-directed IRAs are creating investment opportunities for people. If you're brand new to us, we've been teaching this webinar series for well over 10 years, probably closer to 14 or 15 years. This is a long-going webinar series, and what we do is we record each one of these. And so some of the recent topics we've had Kevin O'Leary on a couple times. We've talked about asset protection basics. We've talked about selecting the best entity for your business, last minute tax tips right before the end of the year, how to protect intellectual property, legacy planning, and market investing, and nonprofits, and how to use those and benefit from those, and retirement planning strategies. There's so many things that are available. All the webinars are recorded. They're available on our YouTube channel. And so what you would do is you would go to YouTube and hit Protect Wealth, or type that in, Protect Wealth Academy, and then hit subscribe. And as you do that, you'll have access to all the new recordings that come up, as well as all the old stuff that we've recorded over, I don't know, everything that we've recorded over the last 15 years, but a substantial amount of it. So there's hundreds of hours of recordings available on YouTube. We encourage you to take advantage of that. And of course, we've got our 3-day Asset Protection Summit. It's the America's longest running asset protection class in the nation. This is, and the theme of the class is a lifetime to accumulate, 3 days to protect. And in the past, we used to charge up to $3,000 to attend this class. We don't anymore because most of the classes are Zoom. They're online. We can do that without the travel and all the speakers coming together and buying cookies and coffee and airline tickets and hotel rooms. And because we can do that, we can now charge, it's free to attend. But what we ask is that you attend all 3 days and you take this seriously, because, that's not to benefit us, it's really to benefit our students. Because if you come in and learn half of a strategy, you become somewhat dangerous, either on the tax or the legal side. And so we ask you to if you're going to block out 3 days, and give us your full attention. And we're pretty good at teaching asset protection, starting at a very basic level, all the way up to how to create and set up your estate. So we encourage you to join us every time we teach the summit. There's always a little bit different lineup of speakers, including this next year. You'll see some new speakers you've never seen before. If you've been coming, the next 2 opportunities, February 6th, 7th, and 8th, and March 13th through the 15th. There's an arrow pointing to the February one, because we are currently taking registrations for that, and encourage you, if you can block out those 3 days. All the classes that we do are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays. I can't bring up the firepower speakers that we bring on weekends traditionally, and so they are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't really apologize for that, because we really do want you to take it seriously. A lifetime to accumulate, but 3 years to learn defensive strategies and how to protect it. So we hope you take advantage of that and attend. This is not a wussy little class. If you're a professional, most often you'll get continuing education credit for it. It's that good, but it wasn't designed for the attorneys and the CPAs of the world. It was designed for people that have a business, have a little bit of real estate, have assets to protect, and are looking for some good tax strategies and estate planning. So encourage you to attend. And then lastly, before we turn the time over to Derek, and we're excited about this, there is always, whenever we talk tax and legal, there's always a disclaimer. Everything we talk about may or may not apply to you. And so we've got some professionals on to be able to answer questions, but we always encourage you to attend the summit, to talk to a professional about strategies, learn a little bit more. Don't go off half-cocked and think every strategy that we talk about will apply to you. Always use professionals when you're dealing with investments. We don't give investment advice. We teach solid, correct principles and then let our students kind of work it out. So we hope that that makes sense to you, or you can read the whole disclaimer if you want to. It's been a long time since I think I've read the whole thing. Anyway, Derreck, so excited to have you on. We had a chance to meet Derreck. We've known about Quest Trust for years, but we really haven't got to know him very well until about August, September of last year. Got to spend some time with him down in Arizona. So impressed with his knowledge, with his company. Derreck, there's so many questions about investing with IRAs. There's the rules and regulations scare people, and I run into people all the time that go, it's just easier just to buy and sell and flip and hold, not realizing the tax implications of what they're doing and the wealth that they're leaving behind. So Derreck, we're excited to have you on. I'm going to turn the time over to you. Kendall and I will be in the background, but and you've structured this to be able to answer questions as we go through. Is that right?
Absolutely. So for anyone listening today, make sure this is styled more as an open-ended conversation. So if you do have questions, I want you to use that Q&A box. We have moderators there that can answer the questions right on the spot. And if they're not able to get to them, or they get like the same question 10 times, they're just going to stop me and I'll answer the questions as well. So when we talk about self-directed IRAs, there's just so much information, Don. There really is. So we're going to do our best to try to cram it all in for you guys, but I think it will be a well-earned class for everyone watching and listening today.
Great. All right. Do you have a PowerPoint you want to share?
Yeah. So I can share my screen real fast. Oh, man. All right, guys. So what I did is I tried to think of a good title for this class, and what I ended up calling it was, honestly, the real use for self-directed IRAs. You know, I like to think of how people are going to use IRAs just naturally. And a lot of times people don't, I think they put too much thought into them. So we're going to break it down, how to use it, why you should be using self-directed IRAs for a lot of different types of investments. Lastly, all right, some unique things that are big debates out in Congress, at the IRS level, and between custodians. So overall, all you got to do is let us know if you have questions as we keep going. Don, I like your disclaimer, but every company has their own disclaimer as it is. So we have one as well, right? I can only give you straight education as we go through this process. And Don, I think, said it best, is people are always the first question, well, where should I invest my money? Or what should I do? Or what is the best investment out there? What is some XYZ? Understand that everyone out there watching, listening, and getting some form of education is at a different point in your life. Right? You have a different amount of capital. You have a different set of skills, you know, something along those lines. So you have different aspects and different needs than someone else. So the only way you can get proper investment advice is, and I always say, you really have to pay for it, right? You got to pay those tax attorneys. You have to pay those CPAs, and that's what they're for. So when you're watching these classes, take this to heart as education, all right? So we're going to start off with kind of real quick what we're going to learn today: self-directed IRA basics, why it's important to you as investors, real life issues, and lastly, how you can get started with any self-directed IRA custodian out there, okay? Yes, I do represent Quest, right? But Quest is not always going to be the best fit for everybody, and we'll show you why as we go forward. So let's start off with how I think the IRS views everybody. Now, I always say the IRS puts everybody into two different categories, right? And there's really two types of entities. The first one I call a taxable entity, right? So what do you think the other one is? It's a non-taxable entity. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we're so used to playing on the taxable entity side of things. So what do I mean when I say this, right? I say the IRS considers you as a taxable person, right? A taxable entity. When you make money, you have to pay your taxes. You get your W-2, your 1099s, or Schedule Cs. But this also holds true for anything you typically create, right? So if I, Derreck Long, set up an LLC, well, my LLC is going to be a taxable entity. If I set up an S Corp, if I set up a C Corp, if I set up a trust, right? Just because I create one of these doesn't mean it's not going to be a non-taxable entity, right? These are all taxable. So when I say a non-taxable entity, what do I mean? A lot of times people are going to be like, well, they relate straight to a church, a charity, maybe a nonprofit organization, something like that. But did you know the IRS says that your IRA is a non-taxable entity? If you set up a solo 401k, that is a non-taxable entity. If you use a QRP plan, right? We can use anything you see here on the right-hand side of the screen to do the same investments. So why are we not using these retirement accounts more often? And a lot of times this comes down to just honestly poor education. People didn't know this was an option, right? So what is a self-directed IRA? I always ask this, and if we were in person, I'll ask this question up front. I'm like, hey, what is it? And I get a whole bunch of answers across the room. But I've been doing this now since, I've been working with Quest since 2011, roughly, right? I've been affiliated with them 2012. And since then, I've never once received the right answer. Because guess what, guys? Self-directed IRAs are made up. There is no such thing as a self-directed IRA. And no matter how often I say this, people still don't believe me, right? This is because the IRS does not recognize the term self-directed. We as custodians will use this as a marketing term. We say, hey, when you set up an IRA with me, I'm going to let you invest in what you know best. So if you go to Fidelity will set you up a self-directed IRA and they let you invest in self-directed in stocks and mutual funds. You set one up with other custodians, like there's a custodian called Bitcoin IRA. They will let you self-directed into cryptocurrency. When you set up an IRA with Quest, we will let you self-directed into real estate style assets. Notice there's not one that's better than the other, it's different. You know, if I want to buy Apple stock, I got to go here. If I want to buy real estate, I have to come here. And if I want to do maybe gold and silver or something like that, I have to go there. You know, so try not to think of the custodians as competitors, but really just different aspects in life, right? We at Quest, we really are real estate experts. It's what we focus on. There are other ways to use your self-directed account with us, and we're going to go over that. But ultimately, you want to find a good custodian that will let you invest in what you would like to. Remember, self-directed is just a marketing term. It doesn't exist. So what are the benefits to using one of these self-directed accounts? The first thing I always say is diversification. If we look at someone's 401k, 403b, pension plan, IRA, TRS, it doesn't matter, right? A lot of times people feel they're diversified. But when I say diversified, what ends up happening is they think, well, I got my 401k and it sits in stocks, mutual funds, some annuities, some bonds. Well, all that's public assets. I would argue you're not very diversified then, because when the public market goes down, you watch all your assets go down with it. We've seen this the last year with the stock market crashing so hard, it affects so many different types of accounts. So I typically say, hey, it's probably a good idea not to take that full balance. Let's take some of it and move it to what I call the private sector. Private sector is our company, very similar to Quest, right? Where we have some now money in real estate, we have some money in stocks or mutual funds. Remember, not that one's better than the other, they're different, okay? What is the biggest reason, though? What I like to label it as tax savings. If you have ever done a fix and flip on the property, you buy a house, you fix it up, you flip it, and you make, let's just call it 10 grand. You don't really get to keep 10 grand, do you? Right? The IRS, they come stepping in and they take some of that 10 grand away from you called taxation. You might only walk away at the end of the day with $7,000 or $8,000, right? Not bad, you still made some money, but did you know I can use my IRA, my SEP IRA, my traditional IRA, my Roth IRA, my solo 401k, and I can do that exact same fix and flip and have none of that capital taxed today. And if you're using the right account, it can truly be tax-free for the rest of your lifetime. So we're going to dive into some of those as well. But notice the tax savings, if you ask me, is one of the biggest reasons you should be leveraging these accounts. The last thing, though, is something I like to label as invest in what you know best. Now, this is kind of something cheesy. I like to think that we made it up at Quest, right? But I always say that if I have my entire 401k and it's sitting in the public market, it's sitting in those stocks, it's sitting in those mutual funds. A lot of times I ask someone, well, what stocks do you own? I don't know. Well, what mutual fund? Why is it making a payment to you? Why did it go up? I don't know. Why did it go down? Oh, well, if you don't know, then why are you investing in it? But we can leverage an account at a self-directed custodian, all right? And I can say, hey, you know what? I got a friend, he's starting a video game company. Well, because he's starting a video game company and I understand what he's doing and I know what he can do, I can use my IRA and invest in his company. Man, I really understand real estate. I know this market. I know where the rentals are. I know that this area is going to go up in value and I can rent it out high. Well, let's use our IRA and invest in that area. You can use your retirement account, invest in any platform you're considering, except for some minor things like life insurance and collectibles. You know, it just doesn't make sense there. But outside of those, man, your IRA is free range. You just need a custodian that will allow you to do it. Now, up here are the 7 most popular type of accounts that you will see that are typically self-directed. Traditional Roth IRAs, I always say are the most popular. It's because they are individual accounts, right? If you as an individual set up an IRA, typically you're setting up a traditional IRA for tax deductions or a Roth IRA because you want that tax-free growth. Common misconception real quick on the Roth IRAs, people are always told they make too much money to qualify. That's all bull. Everyone out there on this call, as long as you have earned income, qualify for a Roth IRA. I don't care how much money you make each year. You might have to take some extra steps to get the money in there and we can walk you through it, but everyone qualifies for a Roth IRA. The employer plans are unique. A lot of people set these accounts up for big things like either something we call checkbook control, which we're going to dive into it a little bit here in a minute, or large contribution limits, right? Like as an example, the SEP IRA, I can contribute up to $61,000 for last year still to my SEP IRA and potentially take that as a tax deduction. So these accounts are really cool for that. Lastly, you have these specialty accounts, the health savings account, the Coverdell account. These are really more for just everyday expenses such as college, schooling aspects, could be buying books, or typical health things like going to the dentist, paying for your glasses, something along those lines. So every one of these accounts you can see on the screen are considered to be a self-directed account and can be self-directed. You just need to find a custodian to let you invest in what you would like to. Now, remember, I just told you that every one of those accounts, the IRS says is a non-taxable entity. Any investment you do, you can avoid all the taxation. Well, if you can avoid the taxes from an investment, the IRS, they're going to put some big restrictions on there for you, right? And we always label it as people restrictions, transaction restrictions, and investment restrictions. There's physical things that are restricted that your IRA aren't going to be able to do because the IRS is already letting you avoid all those taxes. So, what do you think is the very first person, or who is the very first person your IRA cannot invest into? Right? It comes to you. I can't use my IRA to say, you know what, I'm going to use my IRA and buy myself a house and go live in it. And the IRS says you are a disqualified person, right? You're disqualified from doing business directly in that way with your IRA. Well, what if I use my IRA and lend me money? You know, nope, doesn't work either. I'm a savvy investor, right? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set up an LLC then. That's not me, right? The IRS is dumb. Fortunately not, guys, because they give us this unique little list. Now, don't worry about it. I know it looks scary, but it's my job to memorize it. It's Nicole Bako. It's Colin Taylor. They're both on here as moderators. So ask them questions if you're curious about this list. Right? But this list right here is who is potentially disqualified to your IRA. I always break it down to you, your spouse, your parents, your kids, and their companies. Anyone I just labeled plus their companies. So guys, just setting up an LLC, I can't say, hey, no, that's going to help me get around a prohibited transaction. Remember, the IRS gave us these IRAs to do investments and avoid all the taxes. So I can't play both sides of the fence. I can't use my IRA and invest into my wife's business, right? I'm playing the taxable entity and I'm playing the non-taxable entity. It just doesn't work. I can't use my IRA, buy a house and rent it out to my parents. What are you going to do? Foreclose or kick your parents out? Come on, guys. It doesn't work that way. I can't use my IRA and help my kids start a business. All right, the IRS gave us this very specific list of people, but that's it. 99% of the time, you're not trying to do something that the IRS considers a prohibited transaction. Really, you just have questions on how to use the IRA to get an investment done. So let's walk through and see what that kind of looks like. Now, before we do that, let's just pretend for a moment we did enter into a prohibited transaction. You did one of these, right? You bought, sold, trade, loan, extended service, directly, indirectly, it doesn't matter. If the IRS catches you, you could potentially lose your entire retirement account. Think about that for a minute. Buy, sell, trade, loan. I bought a house for me. I sold, something from my business to my IRA, etc. I could potentially lose my entire IRA. So I think it's very unique just to think about that. Be very careful, and you always want to leverage an expert in this area. Quest, we have multiple IRA specialists on staff at any point in time, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That way they can answer those questions for you and just kind of give you an idea if it's going to be a prohibited transaction or not. So I scared the pants off you. Let's figure out what you can invest in, right? Just about anything, guys. I can use my IRA and invest in single-family homes, foreclosures, commercial properties, LLCs, joint ventures. We can do notes, secured notes, convertible notes, shared appreciation, net profit. It doesn't matter. Your IRA, if it can take title to it, your IRA can invest in it. So let's figure out the real reason people are so scared about using self-directed IRAs. And I always say it's because they don't understand properly how to use them. So I break it down to two ways, right? First way I like to say is direct ownership by the IRA. I like this method. You know why? I get to charge you a whole bunch of fees. So if the custodian gets to charge you fees in this method, there has to be a way to get around those. And that's correct. The other way is what I like to label as ownership through an entity or a trust, right? LLC, something like that. This is more commonly known as checkbook control. So we're going to walk through both of these methods and try to figure out how you can do the right investments for you, which fit your needs. So we're going to start with the direct ownership because I think that's the easiest one to understand. So first off, you need to set up a self-directed IRA. Just choose a custodian that meets your needs. I think Quest is the best. Hey, I'm biased. They pay my paycheck, right? But it is what it is. So once you set up that self-directed IRA, let's see what it looks like, right? What does it look like behind the scenes? Well, your IRA is its very own entity. Your IRA has its own name, has its own address. It can have its own tax ID number. It even has its own level of asset protection. Huh. Sounds very similar to an LLC, doesn't it? Right? If I set up an LLC, right? My LLC has its own name, its own address, its own level of asset protection typically, right? Its own tax ID number. Huh. Notice an IRA is really very similar because it has all the same stuff. So if you found an investment, right? Let's say you found a physical property and you want to use your IRA to buy this house. Well, what does it look like? Your IRA just sends money in exchange for the title of the asset. If you're buying a property, right, it would be the warranty deed. Instead of your name on the warranty deed, it's the IRA's name on the warranty deed. Notice you're not doing anything different going through this motion, right? It's still the IRA going through it. It's still you going through it. But since you didn't buy the property directly, who receives the profit? The IRA. Notice in this example we have right here, all profit goes back to the IRA, not to you. This is why it's tax exempt, right? We can leverage our IRA, do investments, and have all our profit today be tax exempt. Now, notice I'm saying today. Are there ways to get it completely tax-free? Absolutely. We got to leverage a Roth IRA, possibly do a Roth conversion, which is a completely different class. So we can talk about that at a later date if you have questions on how to go about that process. So let's look at this. Let's kind of see behind the scenes what's going on here during a transaction like this, no matter which custodian you go through, right? First off, your custodian, in this case, Quest, would stay involved, right? We, as the custodian, we're going to actually hold your hand. We're going to review 100% of the investment documents. Believe it or not, we're actually the signer. We're going to sign there at the title company with you, right? We 100% are going to go through all those motions. But do you know why? Because it's very clean to go about this. It is. And I get to charge you a fee. Don't forget about my fees. I charge you $125 every time you do one of these investments this way. Now, I don't mind charging those fees. But notice you can't just say, hey, Derek, I'm closing right now. I need you to do this. Guys, it's going to take us 24 to 48 hours. Right? It is what it is. That's not an expedited time. That's our normal funding time. Right? Lastly, is you will have to fill out some internal paperwork, which is those F&Bs and things like that for every single investment you do. Now, if you guys have ever purchased a property, right, done a loan, there's a lot of things that happen, right? You got HUD statements, settlement statements, warranty deeds, contracts. Well, throw the Quest paperwork in there as well. One more piece of paper you got to fill out, right? Now, I like to kind of just keep going through some of these things. So I'm going to give another example of investment, and this is how I actually got started in IRAs. So let's just say for a moment you have 3 different IRAs. Maybe your traditional IRA, maybe you have a health savings account, maybe your wife has a Roth IRA or something, right? Well, I can leverage all 3 of these in the same investment. Maybe I want to do a note. Maybe we're going to lend someone $100,000. Well, if I'm going to lend them $100,000, each of these IRAs are going to own a percentage of that note, right? So I purposely have this equal 100 grand because this is how my dad started myself off. Really, he would have $99,000 and not have $1,000 in my IRA. And we do a partnership real quick. So this is nice to see that we can go through this. But if this Roth owns 20% of the note, guess how much of the profit it gets? 20% of the profit. Well, that makes sense, right? All right. HSA will get 10%, the trad gets 70%. This is a very common way to go about these type transactions. So let's look at some pros and cons to these type of methods. First off, a big pro. It's an easy way to use multiple IRAs in passive style investments, right? The IRS likes this type of method. Do you know why? They're looking at Quest books, the custodian's books. As a custodian, Quest gets audited 5 times a year. That is not an exaggeration. We get audited 4 times a year by the Texas Banking Division and once by the IRS. Can you imagine that? This is why we charge you a fee. We're putting our names on the line that this is not a prohibited transaction. Right? We don't ever want to be one of those custodians that is involved in one of those lawsuits that go through all those aspects. So we have a very clean record and a very clean name, right? This is why this is the best way to do an investment in a self-directed IRA if you are a beginner. If you've never done a deal, I would argue this is the best way to do it because someone's there to hold your hand. Yeah, we charge you a fee. Remember, we charge you $125. You've probably never had someone be so open about it, right? But if that's what's going to make or break your investment, I'm going to probably let you know it's not the best deal out there. What are some cons? I've said it multiple times, man, I get to charge you those fees, right? Don't forget you have to do some extra paperwork, right? You're always got to do the internal paperwork. And lastly, Quest sees everything you're doing. Remember, we're signing on the dotted line with you. Some people go, man, it's none of your business what I'm doing. That sounds just like my grandpa. It really does. And my grandpa has so many different layers, so no one knows who he is. It's hilarious. It is. But he has a point. So is there a way to counteract each one of these cons I have here on the screen? Absolutely. And that is what we like to label as checkbook control. Now, before I dive into this, I want you guys to understand that this method right here can be very, very dangerous. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're removing the custodian. And we're going to see that Congress has very specifically wrote in parts to the brand new bill that target checkbook control aspects. So we're going to see that here in just a minute. And Congress is now watching these, right? But let's look at this and see what this looks like. I'm going to say the same example. You have 3 different IRAs, right? Maybe a Roth, maybe your spouse's Roth, maybe your kids have some accounts. It doesn't have to be multiple IRAs. It could be one. I'm just using this as an example. And you found an investment. Man, I want to use my IRAs to buy this property, to buy these properties at the tax office, to do these fix and flips, to own these rentals. The problem is I'm just spending so much money in fees at Quest, right? I'm spending all this money because I'm doing 10, 15, 20 deals a year. Is there a way to avoid all of this and have them quit looking over my shoulder? Absolutely. So instead of having these IRAs buy the property directly, do the loan directly, invest in that syndication directly, whatever it is, set up an entity in the middle. Set up that LLC, set up that trust. I always say this holds all the cash. This LLC is going to go down to the bank, set up a bank account. That's why it's an umbrella. It's going to hold everything. Now, in this example, I partnered 3 of them, but this means this Roth owns 25%. The spouse owns 60%. The kids own 15%. However, if these are going to physically go down and set up a bank account, is the Roth a real person? No. Remember, a Roth IRA has its own name. The Roth IRA physically shows as a member, an owner of that said entity that you just created. But it's not a real person, so someone has to be there to be labeled as the manager. And this is where confusion comes into play. So, all the way up until recently, right? I think there was a lot of debate on this. This has started to become a lot more clear in the last since November 2021. But now I would say you do need a non-disqualified person to be labeled as the manager of that said entity. Let me say it again. Your IRA is the member, your IRA is the owner. You need a manager in place, right, to physically help you set up that bank account. Right? It can't be you, it can't be your spouse, it can't be your parents, and it can't be your kids. Leverage a sibling, leverage an attorney, leverage another business partner, but it can't be one of those individuals we just mentioned. Now, if you can get this actual entity set up, at Quest, we will consider this one investment. I charge you $125 to do this investment. Is this really what you wanted to do? No. You want it to go out, you want it to buy, sell, trade, loan, all this other stuff right here. It could be a wholesale, it could be a loan, discounted note, doesn't matter. I don't have to charge you any fees for any investment you see on the right-hand side of the screen. That's pretty awesome. One fee, you can get all this done. I like that aspect, right? So I think there's a lot of big pros to this. The problem is a lot of times people get hung up on that non-disqualified person because they want to be in control. Well, guess what, guys? You have to give up something somewhere. Ultimately, that person that you label as your manager, I like to label it as exactly that. They are the manager for you. You are considered a fiduciary to your IRA. You need to make the best decisions possible for it. Now, knowing that, the manager needs to take full direction from you. They're not supposed to be able to just write themselves a check and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to take this and run away to Mexico. Physically, can they? Probably. Excuse me. But ultimately, they should always be asking you. So what are some pros? Easy ways you see to leverage multiple IRAs. I think it's really, really hidden, especially from the custodian, and it's super cheap on fees. But what are the cons? Always going to be that non-disqualified person. It's not the IRS's favorite method. It's a very dangerous responsibility, and you must set up the entity yourself. Now, when I say that, I really mean the attorney, right? Not you as an individual. So let's talk about some of the other issues. Can I be my own manager or trustee? The very first thing someone always asks me when I go through this is, hey, can I be my own manager? No. Generally, this is going to be considered a prohibited transaction. Now, if you want to look into this more, check out IRS Revenue Code 4975. Also, the court case that came out in November of 2021 was labeled McNulty versus Commissioner, and it touched on these topics a lot. And this is some things that a lot of IRA attorneys now are looking at. So let's talk about this IRS Revenue Code real quick, 4975. Notice I'm mentioning how this didn't always used to be a thing. And the topic of conversation was right here is a screenshot of part of it. This is 4975 section C, and I have subsection C highlighted on there. It said that for general purposes, right, a prohibited transaction is created when you provide a service to your IRA or your IRA owned entity. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's an LLC in the middle or not. So what is a service? And that was the debate. Some IRA custodians would debate saying, hey, guess what? If you write a check and you're your manager, that's a service, it's prohibited. Other custodians would say, you know what? Nope, that's not the case. We don't think you being your own manager is a service, so we're going to allow for it. But guess what happened, guys? You need to keep reading. Literally, Section E says the act by a disqualified person. Remember, you're disqualified. Who is a fiduciary? You are a fiduciary to your IRA, where it deals with the income or assets of the plan being the IRA. Wow. All someone had to do was keep reading. And this is funny because this has actually been updated. I have the site, I have it cited down there at thelawcornell.edu, so you guys can look it up yourselves as well. So please be very careful. All right, so I always think checkbook control is a unique way. It's why we love to talk about it. And it's one of those things that does come up a lot with self-directed accounts, and Quest can walk you through the right way to make sure that you're staying safe through all of these types of transactions. So Nicole, Colin, are we doing good? I saw a couple questions popping up. I'm going to keep going if there's nothing you need to stop me for. Boop, I'm going to keep going.
Go for it.
All right, guys. So we're going to change gears slightly. We're going to talk a little bit about what Congress is seeing with retirement accounts now. Right now, a little bit about my background is I didn't always work with Quest. Right, I was in the military. I got my degree. I did a lot of other things prior to this. And recently, I am now on what they call a government relations committee. Once a quarter, I actually get to speak to Congress members about retirement accounts, and I get to represent all self-directed IRA custodians. So I think that's really unique from our standpoint that I was elected to do this. So during that, I got to provide a lot of feedback on the Secure Act that was recently released. So if you don't know anything about the Secure Act, it's the Secure Act 2.0 that just passed. And when I say it just passed, it passed December 26th. Okay. So if anyone out there is thinking I'm a super expert in this area, please feel free to ask me questions. But I've had about 3 weeks to go through this. So here we go. What I did is I thought there was a lot of unique key takeaways to the Secure Act. I have all 7 of them posted up here, right? And as we kind of go through these, we have automatic enrollments that come out, RMD are increasing, catch-up contribution limits for your retirement accounts are increasing. They are being more pro-Ross, which I like this. They're going to allow for student loans to be contribution aspects we could talk about later. SEP IRAs and simple IRAs will have Roth contributions. But Section 322 is the one section I want to focus on. Right? Section 322 talks about prohibited transactions and how it's only going to affect the IRA's investment, right? Well, if my IRA is held at a custodian and my IRA holds a piece of property, holds a note, holds all sorts of things, what's nice about this section right here is now, most likely, it's not going to affect the other investments. This is very similar to a solo 401k. But if I have a checkbook control account, remember, your investment was not these right here you see on the screen that are popping up, right? My investment is actually the trust or the LLC. So what's unique about this section right here on 322 is all IRS custodians now have to report on an annual basis any IRAs that own or have invested in a single manager LLC. Now, they're not calling it prohibited, but if we look back at the McNulty versus Commissioner case, which ended in November 2021, and 1 year later, Secure Act 2.0 passes with Section 322, a big topic of conversation for all IRA custodians out there, right? Putting these two combined, the McNulty versus Commissioner case talked about people having unfettered control to the IRA's owned assets. So all these things just means that you need a custodian that understands what you need to go through. Some custodians that can answer questions on a consistent basis, and really hopefully provide you the best education possible. So I always tell people, learn how to be a good way to use IRAs to create your own financing. Be a good borrower, be a good lender, right? IRAs have so much wealth in them. It's somewhere right around 28 trillion as of right now, right? There's trillions and trillions of dollars in there, guys. And if you ever are able to gather at any meetings in person, right, which is where I was able to meet Don and Kendall, right, there's millions and millions of dollars always available. So ultimately, if you would like to get in contact with me or anyone on my team, please send us an email. What we'd like to do is extend just a little promo or something like that for anyone out there that would like to set up an IRA. We typically charge $100 per account, but what we'll do is we'll give you $100 and we'll give you another IRA 100% free. So ultimately, Don, Kendall, that's what I have right here. If anyone has questions about this, please, let us know. But that's kind of what we're going through. And if anyone wants to set up accounts, Nicole, Colin, can you put your emails there on either the Q&A or in the chat box for individuals, just so that way they can reach out to people? Yeah.
Great presentation. Thank you very much, Derek. You're fun to listen to. I enjoyed that. I'm
a skinny guy with big ears and a crooked nose. I don't know if I'm that fun.
Yeah. You know what? And I think you expressed my concerns as well for not self-directed, but for checkbook IRAs. I've seen too many people. My brother-in-law lives down in your area. I guess they moved. He's in Arizona now, and he is the poster child for how to do this wrong. And he believes that his custodian, anything that he can do wrong, he's doing it. He's going in and he's managing all the flips, and he's paying his son to mow the lawn, and anything and everything he can do wrong. And he believes that the custodian, it's their job to watch over, and they would have told him if he's doing something wrong, but he's got checkbook control, and they've given up. Nope.
What's really sad is I hear that story all the time. And so we had to do a lot of studying over the last year on the McNulty versus Commissioner case. And the McNulty's defense was, well, my custodian let me do it. That was their defense. And they had the book thrown at them because nope, no custodian out there ever gives tax, legal, or investment advice. Every custodian out there has their disclaimer, just like you did at the very beginning, right? And that's the thing. And they're out. And that's scary. And it's hilarious how often people just say, nope, I don't care. And they're risking so much. They really are.
And so for me, I've got several properties in a self-directed IRA. For me, it's worth the extra time. In fact, we closed on one today. And I didn't sign the closing documents. I let the IRA company do that. They're so much more familiar with closing documents than I am. I just don't worry about it. Now, yes, it took 24 hours to do it, but that's okay because I know that it's done right and I'm not on the hook if something's wrong.
I always tell people, very rarely are you trying to close on a property in 24 hours. Like, you knew long before that window came up that you needed to, hey, closings today. Like,
Yep, I've got a property tax notice. I send it to them. It's paid for within 24 hours. Probably clears their desk faster than it clears mine anyway. I love checkbook IRAs. Caused me a little concern because I've seen too many problems with it. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the biggest thing is people just need to remember that these IRAs, and not just IRAs, but solo 401k and stuff, they are considered to some degree a non-taxable entity today. So when you're doing investments, you can avoid all your taxes. So the IRS is giving us a very powerful tool. They really are. Well, if they're giving you this tool that you can avoid all your taxes, man, don't abuse it. If you abuse it, they're going to throw the book at you. There's so many investments out there too.
Yes, thank you. So I see a lot of people that own multiple properties inside of their IRA. And so the question that we often get, and I've noticed it a couple times here, Can an IRA own single member LLCs to separate the liability from each property? And the answer to that is yes, they can. But sometimes it's easier just to have another IRA.
It absolutely is. So I always remind people that an IRA does have its own level of asset protection. Remember, it has its own name, its own address, its own tax ID number, right? So really what you're doing is in the case that Don is describing is you're kind of giving yourself almost a dual level of protection in these cases, right? Your IRA can go buy this property. I can set up another IRA and buy another property. I can set up another IRA and buy another property. And it doesn't cost anything extra fee-wise to do so. And that should hold true at any custodian, you know? And so like I said, I'm obviously a Quest advocate, right? Because I work with them, but ultimately I know like once you set up an IRA with us, we're not going to charge you any additional fees if you need another IRA. You know, it's easy for us to get established for you real quick. You already have all your information. So it takes, 24 hours or less.
Cool. So I like that approach of having multiple IRAs more than I like multiple LLCs within an IRA. Because if you don't pay the filing fee in Arizona that year, you don't pay the filing fee in Tennessee, your asset protection is dissolved. And I just think that there's a better, easier way to do it.
And I always tell people too, when you're setting up new LLCs and you're bringing it up right, Don. So like in Texas, we have to fill out the SS-88 form, to go ahead and get just for our franchise fee every single year for our LLCs to make sure they stay active and everything else. And if we don't do that, what ends up happening is, like I said, we can lose parts of that LLC. However, right, there's something that I think a lot of people are missing as well is every time you're filling out and setting up a new LLC, you realize you're telling the IRS, hey, I'm setting up more stuff. Hey, IRS, I'm setting up more things. Hey, I'm filling out more forms for you guys. Because who do you think you're reporting to? Whereas in an IRA, we're going to be doing those things. Remember, we get audited, and not just us. This holds true for most custodians out there. Some of them operate in unique areas, like up in Michigan, they won't get audited as often. But like Tennessee, California, Nevada, Texas, we get audited a ton. It's a pain in the butt.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. There's one thing that I probably ought to emphasize, and this is from an asset protection perspective. And you mentioned that IRAs have asset protection kind of built in. It's not like an LLC or Wyoming or Nevada, but it's pretty good. For most states, they will protect IRAs up to about $1 million. And then depending on the state after that, it depends, but from a personal lawsuit, generally your IRAs are protected.
Yeah.
There's some state exemptions, and we've written a whole textbook on that, but that's beside the point. What I see happening in the lawsuit arena is if you're in the middle of a personal lawsuit, plaintiffs' attorneys are beginning to ask the question, do you have a self-directed checkbook IRA? And if so, it's going to open up a full audit on that. They're going to ask they're going to subpoena all your records and see if when you went to Home Depot to buy, did you buy a Diet Coke as you went through the check stand and using IRA funds? And what they're going to try to do is disqualify the asset protection for your IRA and say, oh, judge, they're not playing by the game. Therefore, I think you should set the standards, the IRA protection aside.
And I just saw a chat pop up that wanted the Secure Act stuff put up there, guys. Real fast, those are my 7 key takeaways. There's a total of 34 different acts that came into the Secure Act. So please leverage this. If you want, send me an email and I can email you the full Secure Act side. And I have it broken down where you just click a link. But so Don, I didn't mean to interrupt you. No. I just saw someone was asking for this stuff. So okay.
Any other questions? What does the trustee manager have to do? And I assume we're talking about for a sure. Checkbook IRA.
So I'm going to answer this question in 2 different ways. All right. The first way is I tell people, oh, they should be doing everything on your behalf. Would be the proper answer. That would be the attorney I always say John Heyer would give. John hires a high-end litigation IRS attorney for IRAs, right? And so I always take note from him, which is funny. So that's would be the proper answer. They should do everything on your behalf. You give them direction. Okay. That's not always the case, though. So we have to understand, I try to think of this more conceptually. I tell people, is the IRS lurking in the bushes? Are they standing directly behind you? No. So you call me on a recorded line audited by the Texas Banking Division and the IRS 5 times a year, and you say, hey, Derek, what should my manager or trustee be doing? I'm going to tell you everything, right? But sometimes we got to think about these things a little bit more conceptually and think of, well, can you give that person more direction? Yeah, I think you can, right? I think we can be a little bit more hands-on with the manager as far as make sure we're giving proper guidance. This is still your IRA. You are 100% still labeled as the fiduciary. Fiduciary defined as someone who needs to make the best educated decisions for the IRA. So when I say decisions, don't be like, all right, well, I'm the contractor, I'm going to go swing the hammer. Nah, come on, guys. Don't be dumb. So I hope that helps.
And avoid prohibited transactions and prohibited people. Yep. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. We have a question about UBIT taxes. Can you cover that a little bit?
Awesome. So UBIT is actually one of my favorite topics. I teach a whole 1-2 hour class on it. I'm going to let everyone out there know that you have probably never actually brought on UBIT taxes, all right, or even worried about it. What you typically bring on is something called UDFI, or unrelated debt finance income tax, right? And this is assuming you're investing into real estate. UBIT stands for unrelated business income tax, and it's when my IRA is running a business. I describe it this way. I say, look, remember, my IRA is tax exempt. I can do an investment, avoid all the taxes. So if I set up a Starbucks, I don't have to pay any taxes, right? No, the IRS is smarter, so they will tax you that UBIT tax, right? Because that would give you an unfair advantage. Now, in real estate, though, we have a separate area called unrelated debt finance income tax. So we really want to separate these out. The reason why is UDFI will allow your IRA to start claiming things it doesn't typically get to claim. It can claim depreciation, expenses, HOA fees, insurance, anything along those lines to offset a UDFI tax. UDFI only applies when my IRA borrows money directly or indirectly. Directly, your IRA, yes, can go to the bank and borrow money. Oop, yep, they call it a non-recourse loan. Indirectly is more common. This is in a syndication. Someone raising money for a multifamily deal or a storage unit, right? Hey, we're going to raise $3 million. We're going to borrow $7 million from the bank. You now indirectly borrow money. You bring on UDFI. Don't worry about it. You can actually take a lot of deductions to offset any taxation that would typically occur. I could talk about that, Don, all day long, but I hope that gives a short overview.
That's a really, really good condensed overview. Thank you for that. It was very clear. I appreciate it.
And like I said, I teach classes on that, guys, as well. Or you can just email me or call me and I'll talk to you separately. If you have a very specific case you want to talk about, it doesn't cost you anything. So,
and if they wanted to either discuss questions with you or set up an account with Quest Trust, Kendall, would you put in that link into the chat screen? I think it's protectwealth.com / what is it, Kendall? Oh, go to.
I put a direct link to the Quest Trust.
Is
Easy
that-
peasy,
is that
right
it?
in through. Is that okay, Derek?
absolutely.
There we go. All right. Let's finish up some questions here and then we'll end this. How do you get a recording of this? Well, go to our YouTube channel tomorrow. It'll be there. Also, anyone who registered for this class should get an email tomorrow saying, here's a link. So it usually takes us about 24 hours. But anyone who registered for this, whether you attended or not, we're glad you attended, but even if you hadn't, you'll still get a copy to that link. to that recording. All right, so can I get a full?
I see one question in there I really want to tackle. Is that okay?
Oh, please. Yep.
And I get this one all the time. Well, if my IRA can't start at Starbucks, how did Peter Thiel do it and make billions of dollars? I love this one. So guys, you have to really look at the Peter Thiel case. All right. Self-directed IRAs have been available to do this since 1974. Huh, that's a long time. I bet you didn't know that. Peter Thiel's very first investment through PayPal, going through these motions, was back in 1996, right? Since then, unfortunately, our tax laws have changed in the last 30 years. And we always joke about it in this industry, but the way he was able to get away with those type of things was it was really a statute of limitation. Not that it wasn't still considered a prohibited transaction back then, but 20 years passed before anyone realized what happened. And the IRS were not allowed to go back that far to say, hey, we're going to call that prohibited back then. It just wasn't going to work. So unfortunately, we like to label it as the wild, wild west. You were able to get away with a lot more riskier things back in the 90s. But if you're trying to go and do investments based off tax code that was written in 1993 to 96, that's a problem. Make sure you start updating a lot of stuff in your books. So I love that question.
Does that same thing apply to Mitt Romney's $100 million Roth IRA?
So what's unique is, and it's hilarious too, because I would say yes, right? Yeah. A lot of money that he was able to develop and build came prior to him having that type of capital. If I have $1 million in an IRA, I can turn it to 2 million a lot easier than I can change 10 grand to $1 million. You know, the more money we have, so as these people start to build this type of wealth, they don't do the same risky investments. Sure, the headlines look great that, oh, they did something super creepy and crazy 30 years ago, but unfortunately, there are a statute of limitation on a lot of different types of things. So,
okay. So Toby's asking about who's the manager of your IRA and was that okay if he set it up a long time ago?
I would say no. Okay. Now, the reason I'm saying no, guys, is in these cases, with the case with McNulty versus Commissioner, and you really want to read into it, they set up a self-directed IRA back in 2011. They used their IRA to set up an LLC. They labeled themselves as the manager because the custodian said, hey, that's going to be okay. The IRS said, hey, you know what? You have what they called unfettered control to the IRA's assets. That's what the debate was there. And they called it something as labeled unfettered control, meaning I have unlimited access to all my IRA's assets through the checkbook aspect, right? Now, they never use the term checkbook control. That is just a marketing term, guys. So when you read the court case, that's what you need to be looking for, is that unfettered access. So just because it was set up a while ago, I would argue, hey, look, it's still going to be considered prohibited. However, don't freak out. Make some changes. You don't need to move your IRA or anything. You can easily have an amendment made to the LLC or to the trust and assign a manager, sign a trustee. You don't need to set up another account or change a whole lot of things. Hey, court case came out. You said, you know what? I see this. I see the Secure Act 322. Guess what? We're going to just make some amendments to update our stuff. And Don, would you agree that no matter what, you should always be updating your LLC docs every couple of years anyways?
Always, always, always. And when Derek talks about blowing up the IRA, and it doesn't mean all the funds go, it means that this transaction that you did might be considered as taxable. You may, if you're really egregious, make it the whole thing taxable. But I think that would be a big step for the IRS to come in and do that. I think that slap your hands a little bit and you'd end up paying a tax or a penalty. But I don't think you're going to lose all the assets inside of the IRA. It just, the IRS is very careful. They've got rules. They follow them. They're very good at it. And I believe, I agree with Derek in that I think they're going to fall under a lot more scrutiny in the upcoming years, especially checkbooks, than they have been in the past.
Quick reminder, the IRS just hired 81,000 plus auditors right now?
Yep.
Interesting. Yep. Probably not a good time to be shady.
Everyone, thank you for your comments. We've now gone, oh, we got an hour? We have. So time for us to wrap up. Is there any other final remarks here?
Guys, there's too much information ever to go over in these type of things. And Don, I'm sure you run into this all the time. So I highly recommend, if you have questions, email myself, email Nicole, email Colin. All three of us are there to help you out. Reach out to Don, right? Don, Kendall, their team is there to really offer some of the best education possible. The reason I reached out to him was when we met at Resident Assisted Living, right? That was the event. Yep. When we physically met there, I was so impressed with the amount of education. And I think it was just a great fit, because that's what we do, right? We're not here to sell you on anything. Everyone's there to really just kind of try to give you the best information we can out there. So.
Well, I appreciate that. And students, take advantage of that opportunity. If you have questions about self-directed IRAs, we highly recommend that you contact Derek and his team at Quest Trust. Kendall has put in a link. Maybe put that again. What was the court case one more time? It was a McNulty versus Commissioner.
Yeah, McNulty versus Commissioner. And yeah, I've written an article on it, and I can email you the physical docs as well from the court case, so you can reference it as well.
Perfect. Derek, so appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise. I appreciate your humor and your energy. Thank you so much for being on here tonight.
No worries, guys.
Please take advantage of that. And we appreciate your comments. Thank you. Very nice things. Derek, thank you. And to everyone, thank you for being on. Have a great, great evening.
You too, guys. Bye, everybody.